Welcome back to the channel. A lot of interesting stuff has happened this week. As you can see, I'm finally on my new setup. Still a few more pieces to come. I need to get my mic to come in. I need to have my background come in. But other than that, we're kind of ready to go. I want to talk about what's happening with Trump at the moment and the tariffs situation. A lot of countries are absolutely terrified because he slapped some crazy tariffs on them. I also want to talk about a bipartisan bill that came out and the potentials of where that may lead. And I also want to look at some altcoins that you should be buying at this point. And we're going to see where the markets are going in the near term. So a lot to get into today. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it. So I just want to start off and say that yes, Trump has finally put the tariffs into full action. April 1st came this week. So don't mind me, I was reading off of a few notes I have here on my computer. So Trump announced a 10% universal tariff. And that was mostly for countries like Canada, Mexico, and the EU, with the big and major one being China, because China, obviously, as we know, imports a lot of goods into America, and America doesn't import nearly as much or significantly as much into China. And not only that, they've also had higher tariffs on the US than the US have had on China. So the Trump administration is pretty much just trying to level out the playing field, at least in their eyes. So a lot is happening as far as inflation that we're going to get into. And a lot of the trade wars is happening now. There's a ton of stuff going on. It's actually getting kind of crazy. Another thing quickly, because of the tariffs that we had recently, we had the Trade Review Act of 2025 come into play. So as far as the Trade Review Act of 2025, this is a bipartisan bill. This was introduced by the Senate, and this was on April 3rd, kind of to combat the Donald Trump tariffs. This is more so coming from Congress. Notifications requirement. This pretty much just means that Congress has to be provided with 48 hours notice whenever Trump decides to impose new tariffs or increase current tariffs. And this is because of the potential impact it may have on U.S. businesses and U.S. consumers as well, right? Then there's also an expiration and approval as well on any new or increased tariffs that expire after 60 days unless Congress passes a joint resolution to approve it. So these are a couple guardrails that lawmakers are starting to put in place so that Trump can't go off the rails per se and just continuously impose tariffs and ultimately almost harm global trade to an extent. I would still argue that this is more so a bargaining chip because Donald Trump knows, yes, over here in America, we're going to suffer, but we know everyone else around the world is going to suffer a lot more because a lot of the massive economies hold a lot of U.S. debt and they trade in U.S. dollars a lot. And in turn, they have to start printing their dollar more, which devalues their currency in order to compete and to take part in global trade and ultimately pay off U.S. debt and other things of that nature. Another big one that I want to take a quick second to read out is the termination power. So Congress can terminate tariffs at any time through a resolution of disapproval, offering an additional check on executive action. So this would pretty much, this line we just read right here would pretty much take away all the power from Donald Trump's administration's hands if this bipartisan bill was passed. I do think that there's going to be some back and forth. I think this bill is going to get revised. I don't think it's going to go out like this. And we've yet to see the long-term effects of tariffs either. So there's no telling if this is actually a good thing for America or bad. In the short term, it doesn't look the greatest, but putting these things in place now to kind of get and slap these other countries in line, you know, these other countries like China who've been taking advantage of a lot of people, not just the United States of America, but in Africa as well. I'm not going to even get into that conversation, but in my eyes, I think overall here in crypto, what we should focus on the most is what's happening with inflation. And we're actually going to talk about that right now as well. So as we look here on the screen, right, we can see that in February, we had an inflation rate of around 2.8%. And I don't want anyone to be fooled by this number because this is core inflation, meaning this pulls all the different assets and markets into one number and they throw it out there. And normally the Fed wants to see CPI reach about 2% historically. Now, as far as core inflation, I think the more important inflation numbers to look at is the consumer data. So as far as like things we use every day, like food, gas, oil, so on and so forth, things like that are more important because those are things that affect our daily lives, right? How often are you going out to buy a new piece of furniture or to buy a whole new bed frame? Now, some of you out there may have done that recently, but generally speaking, most people aren't going out to buy these things on a weekly basis. It's just not happening. So They pull all these other sectors that help drag down core inflation to around this 2.8% range. But generally speaking, the things that we actually care about, like I said before, food, gas prices, vehicles, homes, and things like that, are way off the charts, right? So this number's kind of BS, and I think the Fed just uses it because they want to show everyone that the economy's getting stronger, and we don't have much to worry about as far as recessionary fears and inflation. And I don't want to spook everyone out, but if you go out to the store and you do any type of spending on a weekly basis, or maybe even a day-to-day basis, you know that inflation is a lot higher than what core inflation is telling you it's at right now. Another key metric point that we love to pull out, and this is one that I've been telling you I was going to show you for a while now, and this is the ISM. The ISM finally printed for the month of March, as you can see here. We actually regressed far off of where we were actually forecasted to be in February, and we're back at 49%. So if you don't know, the ISM pretty much details how well the economy is doing and how well businesses are doing as far as like manufacturing and how much they're making, how much they're trading, things like that. And the neutral mark is at the 50 point, right? Anytime we spike over the 50 point, usually means it's a good thing for risk assets like crypto, like stocks, and so on and so forth. We actually creeped back below the 50 point mark, and it's been a relatively strong decline since January, when we were peaking up. When we thought we were going to continue this uptrend, we've actually taken a step backwards. And if you go 10 years ago, just prove my point for a second here, you can see the 2021 top that we found in March and April of 2021 was up above the 60 point range. We also go back to 2017, late 2017, early 2018. We can also see it peaked around the 60 range. So we are a far cry away from even thinking about selling assets. And I'm going to get into some of the assets and altcoins that you should be buying here in a moment, and give you an idea of where crypto and Bitcoin could be heading in the near to longer term. And I just want to get into the fear and greed index before we talk about some of these altcoins that I have on the list today. And you can see that fear is steadily staying within the 30 point range to 25 point range. We were at extreme fear last month. We've came up a bit from that because we have a bit more certainty as far as tariffs and things like that. But the sentiment is still extremely low for most crypto holders, and a lot of people are selling at the moment. Now, you can make the argument that yes, you could have sold a few months back, waited for prices to come lower, and then bought, but nobody knew a lot of this stuff was going to happen. I think for the long-term sustainability of America and the economy, I think it's actually a good thing at the moment, and my viewpoints can change as I get new data. Like I say, you should never be married to one way of thinking, because new things arise that can change your viewpoints on the market and different assets. But as of right now, the market is still pretty fearful, and I'm going to show you what's been going on with some of the altcoins because of how bad the sentiment has been. So looking at an altcoin I've talked about a lot, like Airdrome. I'm not really getting into what Airdrome is. I have videos on that already. But we're coming back into some very key price levels. You can see that we hit a peak of about $1.5 billion in market cap. We're at $286 million at this point. I never thought we'd see prices like this for Airdrome ever again. This is an amazing buy opportunity to pick up the largest DEX on, in my humble opinion, which will be the largest decentralized chain, which is the base chain, and will have the most attention once the bull market starts to creep back up. Another project in the base ecosystem that I have a ton of focus on as well is Morpho. Morpho is a lending and borrowing platform similar to Aave, and they hold a lot of the CBBTC, which is Coinbase's BTC, which they custody for pretty much every single hedge fund and ETF that is currently live at the moment. Coinbase deals with all the custody, and we have to understand that they're going to be using platforms like Morpho to earn a little bit of extra yield and things like that. That is speculation on my part. That is not fact, but I think that is a strong possibility if it isn't already happening. And you can see Morpho also a far cry from where it was at just a few months ago. Mind you, the market cap for Morpho didn't get as high as Airdrome's did. Airdrome is a DEX. Lending platform index is very different. But the one thing I want to show you is the total value locked on Morpho. It's currently sitting at, the current total value locked for Morpho is sitting at almost $3 billion currently, still in the platform. Still. So a lot of people are still choosing Morpho to do a lot of their lending and borrowing. And because, you know me, The one for one, I like to see a one for one with market cap and total value locked, because I think total value locked is a better representation of value, because this is showing you how much people are using your platform with their dollars, which you know is more important than anything. You don't follow what people say, you follow the money, and that's how you make money in crypto, while also getting in early, which is why I'm here to give you a lot of these altcoins as well. If we're looking at the MVRVZ score chart, we can see here, this is a top indicator, and you can see here late 2018, we peaked into the 7 to the 8 range, and that's typically when you're able to find a top. You can see here as well in the earlier part of the year in 2021. If I see the MVRVZ score reach anywhere close to the 7-point mark, this little red area here, I'm absolutely going to start taking massive profits off the table. But subscribe to the channel for that, so when that time comes, you have someone that is detailed and who is looking at the markets every single day. I may not post every day, right? I post once a week, maybe twice a week, but I'm definitely going to be making videos about when I think it's time to sell. So subscribe to the channel for that. Another interesting piece I saw on the global M2 money supply, all right? Now this chart details where Bitcoin's price moves about 2 to 3 months after global M2 makes its moves. And if you don't know what global M2 is, it's just the amount of money flowing into the economy globally. That's the simplest way I can put it. Now, a few things I want to detail and point out on the chart. The M2 money supply is this pink line here, a red line. I'm color deficient if you didn't know, so I don't know exactly what color this is, but looks pink to me. And the white line is the Bitcoin price. Now, if you don't know, every time the global M2 had a little peak, roughly about 2 to 3 months after, we actually saw a spike in Bitcoin's price. Now, what do I mean by that? As we can see most recently here, September 22nd of 2024, we saw that the global M2 had peaked for that year, and we saw Bitcoin's price peak. It's almost exactly, it's about a week or a week off. 3 months later, we saw Bitcoin's top for that specific year, right? If we go back to global M2 here, this is February 2021, we can see that Bitcoin peaked roughly 2 months after, okay? Another key metric as well, when we saw the global M2 fall, and this is September 18th of 2022, we also saw Bitcoin hit a bottom in November. That was roughly 2 months later as well. So the reason why I brought up this chart is because crypto and Bitcoin is pretty closely correlated to the global M2 money supply. As you can see out of the examples that's detailed to you, it's about 2 to 3 months out. So in my humble opinion, we've seen global M2 have a peak around March 9th, March 16th or so. So using simple math, you can look to see Bitcoin have a yearly peak. I'm not talking about a cycle top, or at the very least in the first half of this year, have a peak somewhere in May or June, I would say. So look forward to that as well. And there's another reason why I also think that as well. More importantly, why I think that is because we have something called the Fed Watch tool, and this is from the CME group. Now, this is detailing the probabilities that we may have a interest rate cut. Now, looking at the next FOMC meeting, currently we see we have about 66% chance of keeping the interest rates the same, which are currently at 4.25 to 4.5%, and a 33% chance that we might actually get a 25 rate basis cut. Now, this is less likely in my eyes because we see that inflation is starting to kick back up again because of tariffs, but depending on how the bipartisan bill goes and how inflation goes over the next couple months, we may see these probabilities change. So these are not set in stone by any means. Now, the more interesting number is around June, right? And this is why I was saying we might get a early year top somewhere around there in summertime, which we usually never get, by the way, in crypto. This cycle's been a lot different in a lot of ways, but we usually have lulls in the summertime. And until the recent data came out about the ISM and other factors, I also thought that we have another lull this summer. But it's looking like with these interest rate cuts being a 25 basis point, and then, which is even more surprisingly, a 50% rate cut, depending on what we get here in July, would spark the markets to somewhat start trending upwards again. Now, this isn't something that happens right away. It takes a bit of time for the money to see its way into the market, especially when we talk about crypto. Keeping an eye on this, I will as well, and I'll update you as time comes along. Now, as we know, I've also been charting Bitcoin as of recently. I want to give you guys a clear, detailed view about where we are on Bitcoin's price and where we can expect to go. So I drew out a few trend lines as well. Now, if you don't know, this is what we call a falling wedge, and falling wedges are pretty bullish for where markets can go in the short term. So we might get a bounce off this level here as we come to the end of this wedge. So a bit more consolidation, maybe another week or two, a little bit of boring price action, and we more than likely will see a spike. Now, depending on where we end up is questionable because we have a few levels of resistance coming up. We have a level of resistance around 86,000, more so 86.7K, which I've talked about, the 86.5K level a lot as well. It actually coincides with this volume node. This is why we use the volume profile. Super, super useful indicator. I recommend you definitely use it when trading. We also have another level here that I actually drew out, and this is around the 91.5 level as well. The reason why I drew out this level is because we have a lot of touches over here from previous price action on as support and also as resistance, as you can see right here as well. So there's going to be a lot of volume to fight through these levels. The 86 level, depending on how strong this bounce is, I can see it breaking through the 86 level pretty freely, but I definitely think we're going to get a stop, whether maybe we chop around or consolidate for about a couple of weeks or so, because we have more volume around these $91,000 to $92,000 levels. But the real area that I'm really focusing on is the point of control here on this red line and this massive volume candle. And the reason why we call it the point of control is because it's the largest area of price action. That means bears and bulls selling, so either buying and selling the price. And this is where we get all this previous price history and volume built up at. So I think in order to truly see Bitcoin test all-time highs again, we ultimately have to break this $96,000 level and test it as support. Meaning, I want to see price come up here and test previous all-time highs and come back down and ultimately test this as support. Meaning, if we were to get a bounce off this level here, this point of control, and hold it as support twice, right, we'd have a better chance of breaking previous all-time highs and moving upwards in the market. If we don't get these tests and claim this as support, and we end up breaking through on the first test of support, right, we can definitely and easily fall back down to these two price levels. So that's currently what I want to see from the Bitcoin price. And just to give you guys a clear idea of a date range you could be looking towards, because I did mention that June mark for multiple different reasons, that would probably lead us out into around 2 months from now is where we could see the Bitcoin price possibly start to test this area up here. It's never, ever, ever a certainty. It is always a probability. Do not forget that. And as far as Bitcoin's price as a whole, if you're looking to buy Bitcoin at this moment, just to back to all-time highs, we're up above about 32, 33%. If you count the wicks, we're about 34%. If you just count the bodies of the actual candles, we're about 30% down from all-time highs. So decent time to buy if you have a really big position. I'm actually going to open up another chart that I was looking at. It was the Ondo chart, I believe. Yes, so let me click that. Let me open up the chart here. And this is another good buy as well on top of that Morpho and Aerodrome buy that you could be looking at. Ondo's actually reaching a point of control here. So as far as the volume profile, anything is possible, but more likely than not, we will see a bounce off of these levels here, these around the 80-cent range. And it's going to take a while to get back up to this point, was previous point of control that was up around $1 and around 38 cents. So 36 cents actually. So don't expect the Ondo price to completely jump through all of these price levels right here. There's a lot of volume built up. We chopped around at a lot of these previous levels before. So there is a lot of resistance, as you can see here with these volume nodes. But as far as a good buy price for Ondo, even if it does go 10, 20% lower, I don't really care because I'm getting a massive, massive discount from where Ondo was just not too long ago. And if we detail where Ondo is at right now, you're actually getting it at a 62% discount from its all-time highs. So not a bad time to pick up Ondo either. If you found any value at all, a like on the video would be greatly appreciated. Please, this takes me a long time to make these videos. I'm a very busy man, but every week I come out with these videos, either altcoin videos or market updates. So I would greatly appreciate a like on the video. Click one of these two videos up here. One of them is going to be my perfect altcoin portfolio. Just follow me, just copy me, and buy the top of the bull market. Not financial advice, but you will make some money. Not financial advice, but you'll make some money. And over here, these are the crypto YouTubers that you should follow and that you shouldn't follow. This is just my opinion, but with that being said, I'll see you in the next video.